This is Mike Hodsall of D.O.A. here, and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We would like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Mike Hodsall of D.O.A.
Yeah, he's also promoting his fifth solo album, Shapeshifter. And D.O.A. is planning a 2023 UK European tour, I believe this spring, summertime, or something like that, correct?
Yeah, and Mike's been a busy man. He's got 5 albums in the last 2-3 years, and they're all on Bandcamp, so check them out.
He's a busy guy. Let's get to this interview.
All right.
Good night. Mike, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Mike, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hello, you're very welcome. I'm proud to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. Thanks for all the correspondence, and thanks for agreeing to do this with us tonight.
Well, you're very welcome.
Well, very cool. Well, this past August, you released your newest solo endeavor, Shapeshifter. Can you talk a bit more about the writing and recording process for this new album?
Basically, it's the fifth of my solo albums that I've put out in the last 2.5-3 years.
Mm-hmm.
The COVID times obviously took me off the road with D.O.A., but on the plus side, it finally gave me time to buckle down and work on some of my solo material that was just kind of festering in the back of my head. So this is the fifth album, and it's basically a guitar album. So it kind of harkens back to a more 70s style guitar album like Harvey Mandel, Roy Buchanan, Jeff Beck, those kind of guitar albums in the 70s, really, which I'm a big fan of.
Oh, very cool. Well, Better Times is my favorite track off Shapeshifter. I love the transitions, and the flow is so smooth through that track, and it seems so effortless. Is there a story behind the creation of Better Times?
Well, Better Times, it was actually right in the middle of the darkest of times during COVID when, we were about a year or so in. And, being a touring musician, my life revolved around writing, recording, being on the road, and just kind of that connection with my bandmates and the audience and just traveling and movement. And at that point, about a year in, every time it looked like gigs were going to happen, they would then get canceled again and delayed, and it just seemed to be going on and on and on. And I felt very, very helpless at that time. Like, as though somewhat of a ship without a rudder, if you will. And so that was kind of the vibe. As I started recording it, it just started out, I was fiddling on the guitar and came up with that main figure. And when I started to record it and listen back, I'm like, oh, there's a real melancholy here, but there is a slight feeling of hope throughout it that kind of touches on here and there. So it's not all like trench coats and moping. But yeah, that was kind of what it felt to me as it was in progress. It wasn't intended. A lot of these instrumental tracks, I have no intention going into them knowing what's going to come out of them. Unlike when I write with a band where everyone's kind of putting ideas together, or you're writing songs, that when I'm at home by myself in the studio, it's a whole new modern age of writing where I put down a piece and then I just kind of keep connecting pieces and then making things flow. And it's just, home recording's kind of changed that process, especially when you're just one person. You don't have to ask permission to, change parts of songs or whatever. So that's kind of how that whole album kind of came together, kind of with the exception of there's a track in there called 6 Tons. It's kind of the more heavy Sabbathy song on the album.
Yes.
Kind of the opposite of Better Times. But that one I did specifically write for a friend of mine who loves early 70s fuzz rock, like all kinds of strange European sort of boogie fuzz stoner rock, right? So I basically, I was like, okay, buddy, I'm going to write a song just for you. And that's what that song was. But other than that, everything else just kind of happened organically.
Oh, so very cool. Nice. I know I was listening to one, and then I looked at the name of the song. It was called Rumors of Extinction. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, that's the other song that was written specifically for something. That piece was written as some theme music for a CBC radio documentary about the Snakes people of the Kootenay region where I live. And the whole story is that they were declared extinct by the Canadian government, but the Snakes people strongly disagree with that because they're not. But the government decided that they were for various reasons. And so there was a documentary about them, and I was asked to do some music for it. And that's kind of what I came up with, was that piece. It just kind of popped out of nowhere, out of my head, from the concept of needing something to kind of reflect these technically extinct people that weren't extinct. That's why there's lots of echoey parts and things to kind of suggest a history and a ghost-like quality of people that supposedly are extinct.
Well, speaking of the Shapeshifter and the tracks on this album, when you were in the studio writing and recording music for this new endeavor, did you have a blueprint? Did you kind of have a blueprint as schematically how you wanted to create this album, or did it come to you a little bit more organically? I guess, where was your thought process when creating this new album?
Well, at first, a bunch of the tracks were just kind of ones I'd randomly throw down these kind of guitar-related tracks as I was working on other things, just like, take time out from maybe doing sort of a soundtrack or podcast music or something or whatever. I would just kind of take time out and go, I'm going to lay down just a guitar song just for the fun of playing guitar, or just as a break from doing some ambient music or something. I throw down like a real guitar track. And then one day I was going through my files and I realized, like, wow, I've actually got a lot of these now. And then I started thinking, okay, well, I've almost got an album's worth. So I just kind of filled in the blanks and added a few more until I had a full album's worth. So it's some of those tracks go back almost 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Like it just kind of, like I said, all of a sudden I had enough tracks. Like, well, let's make this a whole album. Then I listened to it and put it all together and added a few more tracks. I was like, yeah, okay, it's fairly cohesive. I called it Shapeshifter because, as you can hear, it goes from a lot of different genres and styles of music throughout. But I don't think anything sounds way out of bounds. Like, so I don't know. It's hard for me to tell from where I sit, but maybe you guys can kind of understand where I'm coming from.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think it had a good flow to it.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask. I'm always amazed because I don't play instruments, but I'm always amazed when I look at the liner notes or look at information you have, and and it says guitar and bass and keyboards, and so you play a lot of different instruments. Can you talk about that process of recording a song and playing all the different things together?
Yeah, like I said, like all 5 of my solo albums have been mostly done all by myself, with the exception of a good portion of the drums in this album, this Shapeshifter album by my good friend Jason Solium from the band La Chinga out of Vancouver. Without having a specific band and just being me in the studio, there's no one else here, so I just do it. I mean, I played bass with D.O.A, so I played bass for a lot of years, although guitar is my main instrument. And keyboards, I just kind of started fiddling around with the last few years. Keyboards are fairly simple because I don't have fancy fingers on the keys, unlike on guitar where I'm very comfortable and have like many decades of experience. On the keyboard, my cat could probably play it better, so I keep all the parts fairly low. It gives you a real freedom when you don't have to rely on anyone else. You can just do it yourself. It gives you immense freedom to just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
The downside of that is there's no one looking over your shoulder and saying, "Come on, mate, that's crap. Like, edit that." It's all in your own head. If it's a bunch of gobbledygook, or if I decide to do a 10-minute guitar solo, well, that's my fault. But it's really freeing to be able to play most of the instruments myself, because like I said, then you don't have to wait for anyone, which is, in my case, is a wonderful thing, because I'm a very impatient person. I can't help it.
Well, as far as tracks go, how many tracks did you record for this album, and how many tracks were left off that didn't make the cut?
Well, the digital version has 1 track that the vinyl version doesn't have because there wasn't enough space on the record. And that's Echo Architect.
Okay.
So that's only on the digital download version and not on the vinyl. Other than that, there's no other bonus material. I literally used up everything over the last 5 years, and I don't think I have anything left. But until I have some time, and then we'll see what happens.
Well, I saw you had a pre-order for vinyl. Have you run into any problems with getting the stuff pressed to vinyl, or is it back running smoothly?
It's come back around to where it's reasonable wait times now. Like this album, it literally should be showing up on my doorstep in the next week or so.
Nice.
The fifth copy actual vinyl. It's about 3 months turnaround now, whereas my last album, October Architect, that album took almost 9 months to get.
Oh, wow.
And the reason for that is that there's only a few places left that press the stampers, the metal plates.
Mm-hmm.
And they're super backlogged because with the popularity, of vinyl coming back, all the big labels got rid of all their pressing plants, and now all of a sudden everyone wants vinyl. So these big labels are leaning on the tiny little pressing plants that basically catered to punk rock and hip hop for the last 20 years, or 30 years, or however many years it's been. So now those people are doing, like printing 1 million copies of Taylor Swift's new album. Meanwhile, guys like me that are getting a couple hundred copies pressed are, you're pretty low down the list, right?
Sure.
Understandable from a business perspective, but it's very frustrating. But things seem to be catching back up again.
Good.
Oh, very good. As you look back at your solo catalog, how do you compare and contrast Shapeshifter to your other bodies of work?
Well, my first solo record that I put out about 2 years ago was called Atmospheres. I can't remember what it was called. Atmospheres something. Music for films that don't exist.
That's I like that title.
And it was basically, that was my first foray into ambient music. I'm a big fan of Brian Eno and Tangerine Dream and things like that. and a lot of soundtrack music. Like the Stranger Things soundtrack is fantastic, and 2001: Space Odyssey and The Shining. I love soundtrack music, so I thought I would try doing something like that. Get away from the rock and the punk and the guitar and all that kind of stuff, and just get deep into atmospheric textures. And so that Atmospheres is my first album doing that. My second album was called Into the Mist, and that one was a concept album that it was kind of a goal of mine to create a piece of music that would fill up an entire album but be one track.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Kind of like Tubular Bells, that kind of a concept. So that's what I did. It started out with me filming some mist on a river in a canal in the Kootenays one day, and I thought, I'm going to bring it home and just kind of fiddle around and kind of make soundtrack music for it. And that 2-minute footage of mist turned into a 40-minute piece of music. So it's cut into side one, side two parts, and it's really like it's like watching a movie, but there's no vocals and there's no visuals. It's an audio movie, but it's very much like, I describe it as if Tubular Bells was recorded by Pink Floyd in Brian Eno's studio, you'd get Into the Mist. I don't know if that paints a pretty specific picture, but it's very atmospheric, but lots of David Gilmour-esque guitar throughout, and lots of synths and soundscapes and spooky noises, but it's a real audio movie. So I kind of went. So I had the ambient album, then I had that giant piece of music, and then my third solo album was called Darker Places. And it was basically a bookend to Atmospheres, but kind of the nightmare end of ambient music, like really dark, tormenting stuff. Good Halloween music, good to scare the kids, whatever you want to do with it. I really like very dark music. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Robert Rich or Steve Reich or any of those people, but I really enjoy that kind of very dark, atmospheric ambient music. So that was my foray into that. My fourth album, I'm a huge fan of The Cure and all those kind of post-punk, Joy Division, all that kind of stuff. And I had sort of a bunch of ideas kicking around in my head for years of stuff I wanted to record. So that album was exactly that. I recorded an instrumental called Faithless, and that was just me fiddling around with a bass sound that I really liked. That turned into this instrumental that had a certain vibe, and then that kicked off the entire album, which that one is my only album that has vocals on it.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Very good. Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, I was just going to, I think you kind of answered it. I was going to ask you about that October Architect, and did you have any reservations in trying to sing, or is that something you've been wanting to dabble in?
To be totally honest, I really don't enjoy singing. But it was necessary. Like some music works instrumentally, and some music needs vocals, and those were songs that needed vocals. Yeah, I have sung in the past, like other than background vocals, but I was in a band 10 or so years ago called Ravenhead, and it started off as like a 3-piece kind of stoner doom, heavy band with giant improvisational sections, and I sang for that. But it very quickly turned into Pink Floyd meets Black Sabbath, hypo-negative-esque. So I sang in the band, but in all honesty, I couldn't wait to get the vocals over and done with so I could get to the guitar solos and the instrumental sections where I was actually comfortable. But being a glutton for punishment, in 2012, 2013, I started doing solo acoustic stuff. So I started writing songs with vocals. I thought, well, let's see how this goes. Not every singer-songwriter, acoustic guy can actually sing very well, so I'll give it a try. And I did. And I just, after a handful of shows, I was like, I just don't enjoy singing, so I'm not going to. I'm going to stick to guitar playing, which is where I'm comfortable and what I enjoy. So, but it was an interesting experiment.
Yeah,
I learned from it.
Very cool.
If you were to do a 6, what and take on a different style? So you've done ambient, you've done a guitar album, and you got one with singing. Have you given any thought to what you might try next?
I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I have some. Well, actually, I'm partway through recording an album with a new band I joined locally recently called the Disastronauts.
Oh, cool!
And it's kind of I joined their band a while. I'd heard them a few times, and I really liked them. But I thought, I got ideas in my head that would fit well with this band. They're a mostly instrumental band. And so I joined that band, and we're recording an album right now at Hallowed Sound in South Spokane with Roger Swan, who's he's our drummer, as well as a Juno Award-winning producer, hip-hop mostly, as it happens. But that's a very kind of surfy, psychedelic garage kind of thing. So again, I'm pushing it in a new direction that I hadn't really gone before, but it's, I love so many styles of music. I don't see the point in just doing one,
right.
Do it all if you can. And so far it's been a great experience doing all these things. So that's kind of, cooking up right now is that album, will hopefully be released, I don't know, in the new year sometime, and hopefully some tours related. As far as any solo material, I hadn't thought about anything. I've just been really busy doing other stuff. So who knows? I mean, I put out so many albums in the last 5 years. I got to sell some of them before I record any more.
Yeah.
I gotta just put the brakes on for a while.
Fair enough.
Well, I wanted to take this to D.O.A. And before we start talking about the 2020 release of the Treason album, can you kind of give us a little bit of the backstory about your journey into the band?
So D.O.A. is a band that myself and thousands of other young punk rockers were a huge fan of in my youth. Growing up in Canada, D.O.A. was a really big deal to me. And so I was a fan as a teenager. And then as I got into my 20s, I started playing in bands. I got into some punk bands. I started touring. And I went and saw D.O.A. once, and I had a good chat with Joe outside, Joe Keithley. And we just kind of stayed in touch because I was in a band called BCDC for a bunch of years, and I used to do all the booking for that band. So Joe and I would keep in touch. We'd kind of share booking information. Like he might send me a message looking for somewhere to play. Like, you ever played in Whitefish, Montana? And I'd know a contact, or, vice versa, whatever. So we kind of kept in contact that way. And then as my punk band started getting out and touring, I always thought, well, you got a 50-50 chance in any question. It's either yes or no. Those are pretty good odds. So I would always say, I'd send Joe a message, hey, we're doing a tour and we need to fill in these dates. And I see you guys are on the road. Can we join you for a few dates? Joe was usually pretty accommodating, so got to know him as the opening act for D.O.A. And then fast forward to years later, the drummer in one of my bands he owns a T-shirt company. So he was doing D.O.A.'s merchandise. So by happenstance, he ended up becoming the drummer in D.O.A. And a few months after he joined, their bass player left, and Patty suggested me, and Joe already knew me and knew I could play, and he's like, sure, let's do it. Mm-hmm. So it was as simple as that. Just keeping your feet in the game, and being in the right place at the right time, and knowing the right people, and not being a wasted idiot, really. That's the best way to get called up to the next rung of opportunity. So that was that, and that was over 8 years ago now. And in that time, we've played over 30 countries, played, I don't know, over 400, 500 shows together. I've been all over the world. It's been an amazing experience. And, on top of that, Joe's one of my heroes, one of my childhood heroes, and I get to be in it with him. So it's a pretty wonderful experience. I get to be part of the D.O.A. legacy, which, is something I will always be very proud of and look fondly back on in years to come. And it's not over yet.
You kind of answered my question, but, speaking of that, what's it feel like to get up there to be in a legendary punk rock band such as D.O.A.? So heavily influential on so many different punk bands around the world. how has that impacted you as an artist?
It's impacted me in the sense that it got me much further afield than I could get on my own. Try as I might, it's really hard to have a career in music and to get out on the road and tour the world. So D.O.A. gave me the opportunity to check off a lot of boxes that I was trying to check. I love punk rock. I love the energy of it. I always have. With D.O.A., Joe writes the majority of the material. That's just the way it is. It's the Joe show. So we're the hired guns that come in and work with Joe, but he writes the material. So it's not a creative outlet per se, but it checks a lot of boxes in the getting out on the road and touring and just that energy of punk rock. And, I love every bit of it, but then I can come home and write 20-minute pieces of orchestral rock, which is the opposite of punk rock. You got to have all your food groups, right?
Exactly. Well, let's go ahead and get talking about the D.O.A.'s 2020 release, the Treason album. Now, help me out. Was this the first studio recording for you and D.O.A., or were there previous albums that you've been on besides the Treason album?
Yeah, I've been on 3 albums and a couple of 7-inches.
Okay.
I was on Hard Rain Falling in 2015, and then Fight Back in 2017, I think, and then Treason, and then a couple of 7-inches. So, yeah, this is my third full-length album with the band.
Oh, very good.
Unfortunately, we're just gearing up to tour it in 2020. We released it literally as COVID hit. So obviously, there was no way for the album to get any legs, and we couldn't hit the road. So, that's a real missed opportunity for the band. So, I'm looking forward to the next album. I don't know when that's going to be, but hopefully the next album will hit it out of the park, and it'll get some legs, and we'll get out on the road with it again. But
as far as the studio writing and record, I guess you said Joe already does all the writing, but the recording process of the D.O.A. albums that you've been a part of, has the blueprint stayed the same throughout the time, or has the evolution of recording changed for you, Joe, and for Patty, or is it hey, it's not broken, don't fix it?
I think Joe's very set in his ways. He's been putting out albums since 1980. Yeah. He's got a lot of albums under his belt, and he does things the Joe way. That may not be the right way or the wrong way, but it's the way Joe does it. And you learn how to kind of work within those parameters. The one thing that has maybe changed is that Joe kind of sends us these acoustic demos of the songs, and myself and Patty, we work on them as the bass and drums, and we kind of work through the songs and have a few ideas. And then when we get together with Joe, pre-recording, we play through the songs for a week or so and kind of work them out and fix bits. And, so we'll have our suggestions, and, often he'll listen to what we have to say, and he'll either yes or no, but I think he listens to us a little more with our input on like the arrangement and things like that of songs now than he used to. At first, when we first joined, he was pretty tight. It's his way. That's the way it's going to be. But, over the years, I think there's been a little more flexibility. So we have a little bit more say in the, not so much in the songwriting itself, but in the arrangements and things like that, and working through songs and the tempos and little bits and pieces, just the sparkle on top.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Fantastic.
Did I read you guys are getting ready to do a European UK tour in 2023?
Yeah. We're going to go, I think it's being booked right now. It'll be the end of July, early August. I think it's 3 weeks. We've booked Rebellion Fest in Blackpool, England, which is always a fantastic punk rock festival. It's just amazing. And that's kind of the anchor. When you get that, then you start booking a tour around it and try to fill it up with as many festivals as you can, and then you fill in all the kind of weekdays with the bar shows. And essentially, we want to play every single day we're there. We try to play. Nice. So if we're there for 20 days, we'll try to play 20 shows. It's grueling, but when you're a band on the road, if you're not playing, you're paying.
Right.
And it gets really expensive because when you're over there, you have to rent a van, you have to rent all your equipment, minus your guitars. Everything else you rent. Then you've got crew, you got flights, you got fuel, you got food, you got accommodations. All these things add up, and you got to make money every day. So every day you're not playing, you're losing money fast.
Yeah.
So we try to go to work and stay at work. We work hard while we're on the road. Have a good time, but it's by the end of it, when you work 2-3 weeks straight without a day off, and every single day is in a different town, you are exhausted at the end of it. But strangely, we keep going back. We love it. So, so that's looking forward to that in the summer. And there's a handful of things kind of coming up. We got some shows in and around Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast in January, and then it looks like we're going to do a run through probably Seattle, Portland, that kind of area in I think in March. Some shows around BC and Alberta, I think in April. I'm not sure. So there's stuff starting to percolate now for the new year.
Oh, very good. I guess at this point in Joe's career and for the D.O.A. name, as far as methodologies of playing live in North America, that is, do you guys go out in the old-fashioned way in a bus and play X amount of weeks straight in a row, or do you guys do the weekend warrior stuff? How does it work for you and Joe and the rest of the band?
It's usually a combination of those things. We'll usually do like a 2-3 week tour of the States, and we'll do a 2 or 3 week tour of Europe and the UK, a 2 week tour of Eastern Canada. So there's usually about 2 to 3 week long trips we'll do in a year, and then we'll fill in like 4-day trips all peppered throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
We used to play a lot more shows, but as you may or may not know, Joe's Burnaby City Council.
Okay.
So he's an elected official, and that's a pretty big responsibility. So that kind of cut our touring in half. But he just got reelected for his second term.
Nice.
So that's another 3 years he'll be in office, and which is fantastic. Joe's always been about the politics. D.O.A. is synonymous with political opinions and making change, and that's what D.O.A. is and has always been. It's always been a vessel for Joe to speak about what he feels needs to be changed and sorted out in the world. So for him getting into office as a councilman, that was kind of a very logical step that he'd been trying to kind of get to for a lot of years. So, although, we're not playing as much, that's a bit of a disappointment for myself and Patty, but on the other hand, we also really respect what Joe's doing, because he's making a difference in his hometown, and he's fighting for the low people, the people that need help, and that's kind of always been his modus operandi all these years. So we're really, really proud of him and what he's doing, and hopefully there'll be more shows later on. I don't know how many more times he's going to run, but who knows? But we're happy for him.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, that's cool. Where does the band's take on like live albums? When I was doing some research, I don't think I found a whole bunch of them. Do you guys just not like them, or is there any plans to maybe do a live album on the new tour?
I don't know. I'd love to see one happen in the next few years, because this lineup's been together and solid for 8 years. The last one came out just before I joined in, I think, 2012 or 2013. I think that's what I saw. And there was another one from, I think, the early 90s or late 80s, but I don't think Joe has access to it, because I've never seen it in the merch table. I've never seen it or heard it. I'd sure love to get a copy. Do you have one?
No, we do not.
Yeah. I'd sure like to find one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have one last question for you. Jeff, do you have anything left?
No.
So the mystery of rock and roll. I ask this question to all of our guests, but with the dawning of the internet and social media and what have you, has taken the mystery and the mystique out of rock and roll. And let's face it, you're in a legendary punk rock band, D.O.A., that shared that mystique back in the day. For you, as the artist and the fan of music and rock and roll, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the accessibility that the internet gives us? Because let's face it, if we didn't have the internet, we wouldn't be doing this with you tonight. But yet the mystique just seems like it's a lost art. Where's your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I think there's with every technology, there's pros and cons to either side. I can record a song in my bedroom and have it released on Spotify or something by the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's instantaneous. It's accessible all over the world, no borders globally. However, so can everyone else.
Right.
So the chances of getting it discovered is almost zero. Mm-hmm. So you've gained all this access, but you've lost the exclusivity. Like when I was younger and in bands, you used to have to really work hard to book shows. You couldn't just look up on the internet where to play. You had to. We used to get. We'd call the Chamber of Commerce in any town that we wanted to stop and play at, and we'd ask, "What are the live venues? Do you have a phone number?" And then you'd start calling. It was that organic, right? And now, if I want to know where to go on tour or where to play in this town, I just look up some other bands' tour list and see where they've been, and then I look up that venue. And so in that sense, you've really gained a lot of access. But what you don't have back then, like I say, you really had to be committed and work really hard and really want it. Now anyone has access to that same information, and so that does water down things and clogs up a lot of venues with maybe more weekend warriors than professional musicians. Not saying they shouldn't have their place, but it's harder when there's so many people going for the same dates, right?
Yeah.
And as far as like the mystique and things like that, if you look at like Led Zeppelin, for instance, like Jimmy Page, you heard a lot of rumors and read some interviews, and it's like, oh, he's kind of spooky, he's into Aleister Crowley, but you never quite know anything.
Right.
You never see him. You just see him on stage or the odd picture. So there's always this, it's like reading a book. You put the image in your head of what it looks like. Whereas now it's like Johnny Depp ate a bag of chips. Wow. Who cares?
Yeah.
But it's so, celebrity, people can't do anything without being seen. So in a way, they're always on, they're always in character. So there's a very big negative to that. On the other hand, you can also email or contact your favorite musicians or movie stars or whatever. You can send them a message and you might get a response. So there's a lot of access to a lot of musicians and celebrities and everything, which is great. But on the downside, sometimes people don't get a break from it. And like I say, they have to be on all the time. They get bombarded. They can't do anything. Can't have a family picnic without someone taking a picture of them.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I miss the days when I was a kid. Like I thought Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page and Black Sabbath and all those bands, they're like wizards to me. They're magic.
Mm-hmm.
You'd look at the Houses of the Holy album cover, you'd open it up, and you're like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
What's these weird kids climbing up spacey rocks into weird skies? Like, what does this mean? And it was just magical, My Cheap Trick records, I'd look at the, Rick Nielsen and his checkerboard guitar, or Kiss Alive 2. It's like, wow, this stuff it's magic, right? And I don't see that's gone now. That doesn't exist. Most people only see an album cover on their phone, so it's like the size of a stamp.
Yeah.
So that part of records is gone, and that's sad.
Because
art to me is hugely important to the album, but not so much in the current. Just download it and discard it, and it's just everything's different now, and I just kind of have to accept it, as do we all. You can't go back in technology. But, one thing I would say is in retrospect, Lars Ulrich was right going after Napster.
He was.
Yeah.
Even though everyone, shit on them for it, at the end of the day, you look back and go, if only they'd won that lawsuit, I'd be selling albums and not making 0.0004 of a cent
right
for a play on Spotify.
Yeah.
Downloading has absolutely destroyed the income of most musicians.
Mm-hmm.
On the upside, like I said previously, anyone can globally release music now. So, pros and cons to everything. Keep kicking the can and hope things stick, I guess.
Well said. Well, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off that you would like to plug or promote?
Please buy my albums. There's that. Go to my my Bandcamp page. You can order all my albums. 3 of them are in vinyl. They're all in digital copies or CD copies as well. But buy that stuff and then go see D.O.A. on tour and come say hello.
Oh, so cool. Well, this is how things are going to work out. This interview should be released within 2 weeks, no later than 2 weeks. And once Jeff, the editing wizard, has it all cleaned up, we'll send it to you immediately. Sound good?
Excellent. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, this was a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, we'll be in touch with you in about 2 weeks. Sound good?
Great. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
wagon says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out both their eyes. They roll the dice. Take your chances.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The Sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts.